Hi, and welcome back to another AnyRPG Development Livestream. In these videos, I livestream the development of the AnyRPG Engine, a free and open source role-playing game engine designed in Unity and written in C#. If you don't already have a copy of AnyRPG, you can pick one up from anyrpg.org/downloads in both Unity package and source code format. You can also find free copies of the games that I work on at the same page for download. In this episode, we will be adding additional audio controls to the game engine in the form of a voice audio slider and a UI audio slider. Right now, we have an effects audio slider in the settings menu under sound, but we don't distinguish between these UI clicks. Let me just see if the volume's high enough you can hear that. Yeah. We don't distinguish basically between these UI clicks from the mouse overs or the voice and audio dialogues or special effects like those meteors that were drowning out all the voice in the last episode. So I really want to be able to fine-tune that kind of stuff. So we'll be adding additional sliders to the UI and then connecting them to new audio sources in the mixer. So let's get started with that. We've got our AnyRPG main mixer right here, and we have 3 channels: music, ambient, and effects. We'll need to expand that. So under, I think, the groups, we want to add a new group, and we're going to call this one UI. And then we'll add another group, and we will call it voice. Whoops, not under UI. Undo that. Under master, there we go. Add the new group and call it voice. So now we have channels to play the UI and the voice through separately from the effects. So then the next thing that we want to do is connect our audio managers to this and then give our audio manager a way to play these. So the audio manager is found in the Lost Soul game manager. We'll open up that game object and we'll go into the audio manager. We have the music source, effects source, and ambient source here. So I'll just duplicate the effects source. And we will call this one the UI source. And for the output, instead of the effects, we'll have the UI as the output for it. Next, I'll duplicate that again. And I'm going to call this one the voice source. And in the output, I'm going to connect that to the voice output of the mixer. And now we need to connect the audio manager to these sources. So we'll open up the audio manager. We'll set a default UI volume and a default voice volume. I'll add new strings for UI volume and voice volume. And then I'll add serialized fields so we can connect these to the correct sources. So we will have the UI audio source, and the voice audio source. Then I'll want to make properties for those as well. So quick actions and refactoring, encapsulate field, quick actions and refactoring, encapsulate field. I'll rename them to match our regular naming scheme. I think I did the wrong one there. Let's just save that. All right, and then we'll want to check the default volume bit here, and where we have the effects volume, we'll want to do the same thing for the other two ones. So if player prefs has the key my UI volume, then set volume my UI volume, getting the float my UI volume. I'll want to expose those fields as well. So quick actions and refactoring encapsulate field, quick actions and refactoring encapsulate field. And then we'll set the music volume to default UI volume. Okay, we'll want to do the same thing for the voice volume. So if player prefs has key my voice volume, then set the volume based on that key. Otherwise, set the volume based on the default voice volume. And let's see here. Next, we're going to want to have these things copied. So we'll copy set effects volume. We'll make a set UI volume. And we'll want to do that for the voice volume as well. So set voice volume and playerprefs.setFloat my voice volume and audiomixer.setFloat my voice volume. We've got 4 exposed parameters. We'll want to expose the rest of them here. So we'll go to the UI. We will right click, just a second. do we want to add that? So effects volume is volume of effects. There we go. Expose volume of UI to script. And then we want to do the same thing for voice, and we want to expose volume of voice to script. There we go, that's better. So under music volume, we have UI volume. So we want to rename that to UI volume. And then the volume of voice, we want to rename that to voice volume. Okay, good. So now we're able to actually access those parameters and set them through our script. So when we use our audio mixer set float call, we'll be looking for basically the exposed parameter that matches the string that's stored in this variable, which is set to the proper capitalization. Okay. So then we're going to copy play effect twice. One will be called play UI. And we'll be asking the UI audio source to play that. One will be called play voice. And we'll be asking the voice audio source to play that. For the UI hover sound, instead of play effect, we now need to call play UI. And for the UI click sound, we also need to call play UI. For stop effects, we'll add stop UI as well. Although I don't think we'll ever actually call this, but you might as well just make it. And then we'll have stop voice also, which will stop the voice audio source. So now we have a way to actually play these through the correct sources in the audio manager. We'll let that compile and then go to the audio manager. And now we need to add the UI or audio source right there. And the voice audio source right there. Next up, we need to make sure that we're playing the right things through the right audio sources. So in our cutscene bar controller, we will want to put the voice narration sound effects through the correct call here. So instead of play effect under the process dialog node, we will be calling play voice. Next, we want to just check if there are any calls happening. I think the UI ones are already pretty much special anyway. In the we're going to be calling UI click sound instead of just the regular effect. So I think we should be good on all the script changes for this part of it. Now what we need to do is actually go adjust the sliders. So to do that, we'll actually look for and open up a window, specifically, I believe, the settings panel. Let's go into the scene. This is the correct one. What we want to do is go to the panel sound here, and I'm just going to duplicate the effects volume line twice. Let's just disable the UI panel and enable the sound panel so that we can see this here. So Control D to duplicate the effects volume line, and again, and for this one, this will be the UI volume line, and then this one will be the voice volume line. We'll want to move this one down, and then do the same thing with the voice one, move it down. Alright, and let's see, the master volume, let's put it at a position of 60 downwards. I think these ones were moved in relation to their own lines. Okay, I think, you know what, I'll just leave the spacing alone for now and we can fix that up later. So what's important here is that this should now be called the UI volume text, and we'll change that to UI volume, and this should be called the voice volume text, and we'll change that to voice volume. In the panel, let's see if there's anything that we have to drag over and make references to. Doesn't look like it. So we will need to open up, I believe, the settings menu. Actually, let me just check. We may have a specific sound panel controller. No, I don't think so. Okay. So there should be some methods in here that respond to UI slider. So let's just see if we can find those. There. So music slider, effect slider, and ambient slider. So what we're going to do is we'll make the public void UI slider and public void voice slider. And what happens is these methods will be called whenever we move the sliders. And they'll set the effects volume by grabbing that slider's value. So we'll want to go to the definition right here. We have a public slider, ambient slider, effects slider. We'll make UI slider and voice slider. We'll let that compile, make sure there's no errors. Okay, that looks good. I don't see any issues here. So now I'll make sure I rename this to the UI slider. And this one to the voice slider. And then pull the UI slider over onto the UI slider and pull the voice slider onto the voice slider slot. Then on the UI slider, instead of calling the main settings menu controller .effects slider, we'll call main settings menu controller .UI slider. On the voice slider, instead of calling main settings menu .effects slider, we'll call main settings menu .voice slider. I'll find all references to the effects slider because I think we have one or two more things to do here. When we initialize the volume slider values, so here we'll set UI slider.value and we'll be grabbing that from the player prefs. And then we'll set the voice slider's value and we'll grab that from the player prefs as well. Okay, I think that's everything that's necessary in order to actually individually control those things. So let's start testing this. First thing we should be able to do is go in and drag the UI slider and see if those button click noises disappear. So it appears that the UI volume clicks have not disappeared. So we have a little bit more work to do then. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the audio manager here and I'm going to find all references to the play effect sound because we might be calling the effect sound manually somewhere instead of the UI sound. So in the dialog controller, that's one place where we're calling it. And here, I'm just going to change that to play voice. For the player combat here, we don't need to make any change to that. So going back to the audio manager, it looks like we are potentially playing the click sound properly. I'm making the wrong function call here. This shouldn't be set effects volume. This should be set UI volume. And this should be set voice volume. Let's save that. Now we'll load the game again and see if we can disable the UI sounds. Okay, good. So we can disable the UI sounds. Let's just return and exit game. And then I want to load it up again and just make sure that the UI sounds are actually disabled. Good, so that stayed the same. We'll go to settings and sound here, and the UI is still all the way down. The music volume didn't seem to save itself. Let's put the effects halfway, the UI there, and the voice at 3/4. And return and exit game. And then jump back in again and just see if all those volume sliders stayed at the correct spots. Okay, that's better. The music slider's where it should be, and this is at halfway. Okay, good. So let's turn the UI volume all the way down. Make sure the voice volume is up, and I want the effects volume down this time. We can return, and now in order to actually test this in the game, we're going to need to make some changes to our characters because our characters have a single audio source, and I'll show you with the apprentice historian. If I can find him. Apprentice historian flare unit. So our apprentice historian here has an audio source on him, but it's connected to the effects basically, and I'd like to change that. I want to have an audio source that's connected to effects and an audio source that's connected to voice, so that when our characters play sounds like getting hit with a sword or blood squirts, they can go through the effects, and same with, for example, like spell casting sounds and such. And then when they're talking, it can go through the voice, and then we can control those individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new empty. I'm going to reset the transform on it, and I'm just going to call this audio sources. I'm going to create a new empty again, and I'm going to call this one the effect source. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that, and I'm going to call this one the voice source. Next, I'm going to take his audio source here, which is the effects source, and okay, I guess I can't drag it over. I think I can probably copy component, go over to effects, and right click on transform, paste component is new, good. And then I want to go over to the voice, right click on transform, paste component is new, good. And then I'm going to connect the voice to the voice output. Great, so now make sure that this is 3D linear roll off 50 yards, that looks good. So now what we can do is we'll need a way to actually reference these audio sources. I'm going to remove the existing audio source from this character, and we're going to need to basically just make a new class in order to track this. So this will be a base class in the game for not just characters but units in general. So we'll go to the engine and go to scripts, and I'm just going to put it in character for now, even though technically it's not for characters specifically. It's going to be a C# script, and we're going to call this thing the unit audio. We'll double click to open that, and we'll add the AnyRPG namespace to it. And then put it in the AnyRPG namespace by cutting all this stuff out here. Just paste it in there. This is going to have a reference to the private audio source, and to be able to reference an audio source, we will need Unity Engine.audio. And the first one will be the effect source. We'll want to serialize that field so that we can add it into the inspector. And the second one will be the voice source. Rather than accessing those, we will be having methods to play audio clips on them. So what we want to do is create a new public method called play effect, accepting an audio clip, and this is going to be a void. And basically it's pretty much exactly like the ones in the audio manager. So actually I'll just copy that directly in there. And we'll also want to make sure, of course, that if the effect source does not equal null, then we'll be playing one shot on the audio clip. We'll do the same thing for play voice. Okay, that's it. It's a pretty simple class. So now all we need to do is just add that. So we will add the unit audio, pull down the effect source, and pull down the voice source. Alright, so now when Apprentice, Historian, Flare talks, we will want him to talk through the voice source. So he's going to be doing that in his dialogue interactable. At some point, we are initializing and grabbing an audio source. In the interactable option, I believe, so what we want instead of an audio source is a reference to the unit audio, basically. So this is going to be a protected unit audio instead. I'm going to rename this to unit audio, and actually unit audio is wrong, it's supposed to be a capital U, and that means that we have to rename this script as well. And we have to make that capitalized. Okay, for this, it needs to be a unit audio. We will rename my audio source to my unit audio and apply. We'll find all references. Actually, you know what? We still need to actually grab the unit audio. That's going to be done right here. Instead of getting the component audio source, we're going to be getting the component unit audio. Then find all references to that, and everywhere where we call it, instead of calling play one shot, we will instead be calling it, asking it to, this is a combat effect, so it's going to be play effect. This is a casting audio clip. It looks like we actually do need to expose directly the audio sources just for this ability right here. So we'll reopen the unit audio script. We'll right-click Quick Actions and Refactoring, encapsulate the effects source, Quick Actions and Refactoring, encapsulate the voice source. Save that. Now we can go back here and my unit audio dot my effect source dot clip, and then my unit audio dot play effect. Honestly, actually, we don't even really need to do that because we can just call play effect directly. So let's just save that. And then in the end cast cleanup, we need a way to actually stop these as well. So this is playing through the effect source, so we'll just call effect source.stop. And this will prevent us from doing things like cutting off voices that were still happening. Like I noticed in one of the cutscenes where it was actually cutting off the water plant's dialogue originally when the guy stopped casting. So that's good. That actually fixes a bug right there. And actually, you know what? We can't necessarily know that those things are null or not, so maybe it would be better. Yeah, in fact, I think what I'm going to do actually is I'm instead going to make a public void stop effect. And basically, if the effect source does not equal null, then effect source dot stop. And I think I'm going to do the same thing for stop voice. And if the voice source does not equal null, then the voice source dot stop. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay. And then that way we actually don't need to expose these, because I'd actually rather avoid exposing these, because otherwise we always have to check if they're null before we attempt to use them. So here we'll just be calling stop effect. And then this is a animation hit event. So this is also an effect. So instead of calling play one shot, we'll ask it to play effect. Okay, Control Shift F to S to save everything. And I think that'll clear up all the issues except for, let's see, this one. This is the dialogue, so this is where we want to do play voice. And this will allow our character to speak using the voice mixer. Let's save that. Okay, good. So now let's press play, and we'll load up the game. And I will load my tester, who's in the Sun Temple right now. And let's start this and just adjust his voice up and down while he's walking and see if that's working.
Although mana could grant sentience to anything it touched, it did not grant intelligence or wisdom. Fire elementals would burn everything around them. Likewise, the dead would come back to life with an eternal grudge against. Wars tore the world apart and threatened to destroy it. The Sundancer twins created the Sunswarm with the goal of banning magic use and protecting the world from harm. They amassed an army of followers and tried to convince everyone to abandon their harmful ways. Agreed, and there were many battles.
Okay, good. I'm liking that so far. Let's watch the cutscene now and see if we can actually hear the voiceover.
The Magi were destroying the world with their thoughts. The more magic was used, the more monsters emerged. The undead were winning the battle against the living. The Sunsworn offered the barbarians the chance to repent. The barbarians refused, and the Sunsworn were forced to wage war on them to protect the world.
So that's a lot better. I think the effects aren't quite as loud, and I could actually hear the voiceovers happening this time. I think I still had the music volume a little too high. Let's turn the effects and music almost all the way down. And then just load that up and go through that one more time.
Although mana could grant sentience to anything it touched, it did not grant intelligence or wisdom. Fire elementals would burn everything around them. Likewise, the dead would come back to life with an eternal grudge against everyone. Wars tore the world apart and threatened to destroy it, until the Sundancer twins created the Sunswarm with the goal of banning magic use and protecting the world from harm. They amassed an army of followers and tried to convince everyone to abandon their harmful ways. Not everyone agreed, and there were many battles. The Magi were destroying the world with their thoughtlessness. The more magic was used, the more monsters emerged. The undead were winning the battle against the living.
The music is definitely lower, like low enough I can hear the voiceover now. I think I'll be tweaking the effects a little bit in the future. I think some of these effects technically have audio sources on them, which are probably set to not go through the correct mixer. So that's probably what's happening there. But in general, I am pretty happy with this now. We have the ability to basically, listen to a dialogue over top of louder things by turning it down now without losing the rest of the sound effects in the game. So as always, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then don't forget to thumbs up the video, subscribe to the AnyRPG YouTube channel, or just leave a note in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.